Frogs Today reported that Kendall Briles was a leading target to be the offensive coordinator at TCU. That was out there. They got it first. And Brian Estridge, who runs that, I just texted him a little bit ago, and I asked him, I said, has anything cooled off when it comes to Kendall Briles and TCU? And he said, I think so. There was the initial hypocrisy from some TCU fans, and then there was the backlash from a lot of TCU fans who said they did not want to have anything to do with Kendall Briles in that program at TCU.
Yeah, and I guess we'll see what happens when and if he gets hired, but they already have 2 Briles staffers on the staff at TCU, and Carlton Buckles, who coaches in the secondary, and their strength coach, Kaz Kazadi. So, what Kendall means differently than that, if the whole intention is to keep away from anybody who was here during that time, well, that bridge has already been crossed. So now to get into specifics about what everybody did, I think that's kind of unclear to most people in the public anyway. So, I don't know if the outrage for them is necessarily warranted, given the fact that Sonny Dykes has already hired 2 Briles staffers on there anyway. What does one more mean in the grand scheme of it?
What's the name Briles?
Yeah,
and
that's it.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's the son of Art Briles. Now, I want to say first, 800-pound gorilla in the room or whatever, what reason would we have to, be shied away from talking about it? I mean,
none.
We have as much expertise to talk about it, I would think, as probably anybody. Not scared to talk about it or whatever. It's not official. There was a bunch of rumors on Saturday night, and as far as that goes, like you said, there's already a couple staffers there. So to be a TCU fan who suddenly gets uptight about it just seems pretty silly, because if you're going to get uptight, you would have got uptight when Kaz Kazadi got hired. Because if anybody was day-to-day with players and you had concerns about Baylor players or whatever, it was Kaz Kazadi more than anyone, and not even close. So if you were fine with that, then, yeah, you should be fine with basically anybody else. Now, that does beg the question, does that mean that Sonny Dykes just gets to go and grab every former Baylor staffer and just add them at will, you know what I mean, to basically take Art Briles' old staff and just move it to Fort Worth and have the success that they could have or should have had? I mean, I do think that that's, probably what some people wonder. Okay, what's next? Is Phil Bennett going to be your defense? You know what I mean? How many guys are you going to add to where it's basically the old guard? But, it's 3 guys potentially if Kendall gets hired, and that would be interesting just simply because of the fact that, it was the old coach there who had as much of a part in bad-mouthing his father and the program that his father ran and that he was a part of as anybody did. It was Austin Media and Gary Patterson, probably 1, 2, and then you add in whatever national reporters that you want to throw in there. But that was basically the ringleaders of, saying as many caustic, nasty, and driving as many comments as possible. So there is that weirdness there of just that's a place where Gary Patterson has a statue and nobody badmouthed your dad as much as that guy did out in the public. And so I'm sure that's weird, but that's also coaching. That's just coaching. You were a rival of this team, and now you're at that team. That's just part of the deal. So I don't think on the surface it seems weird because it's Briles and TCU, and you just think of what it was like in 2014. That was also almost 10 years ago. And so I don't even know how many people are even still thinking of it that way. You know what I'm saying? At this point, especially younger fans couldn't care less. They don't have no idea what we're even talking about probably, or they had the faintest idea because they were 9 when all of that happened. Okay, on the surface, great coach. I think obviously would be a good hire to replace Garrett Riley. I think, obviously Sonny sees the benefits of that system, Kendall's background in Texas, the recruiting that he could do. They wouldn't have to basically or he could help fill in the blanks where Kendall maybe isn't as strong, because Sonny's, again, he's the offensive mind ultimately of that football team, and we said as much when Riley was there. So I think from a football perspective, it makes tons of sense. From a PR perspective, I mean, if I was TCU, I wouldn't have done that, but I also know they're not really thinking too much about the PR side of it, obviously, or they were, and they were floating the name out there. But from a football perspective, it makes sense. From a PR standpoint, I'm like some of their fans and just like, why do that right after we had this run? Like right after we had this run, the most popular we've probably ever been, and you turn around and now you want to bring a guy who we used to hate and loathe into the mix. And I can see where that's disappointing, but he's not gone to jail. He doesn't have anything hanging over his head. He's worked at multiple places just like a lot of other Baylor assistants did. Look, the offensive line coach in North Carolina is one of those guys. 3 guys potentially on TCU's roster. Texas has had some of those guys. Jeff Lebby's at Oklahoma. Like, where are we supposed to put their foot down, right? Why now? It's because of his last name, and that's simply why. But it is a little bit hypocritical, I think, on the part of some fans who were probably saying one thing a few years ago and are now suddenly like, everyone deserves a second chance. That whole drill, because it's your team that stands to benefit from it. I hate that hypocrisy, and there's definitely some of it out there. But, again, I don't see what prohibits them from doing it, outside of just a few angry people on Twitter, because he's been coaching this entire time. He's been at FAU. He's been at Arkansas. He's been around.
His 5th job.
Yeah. So from that standpoint, like I said on Twitter, like, this is not at all surprising. I said that because it's coaching, because these guys eventually overlap and they eventually end up where you never thought that they would end up. And Sonny's a smart guy who knows offense. And so who would better fit the bill? I'm sure there's probably other candidates that people could think of, but who's realistic, who could help the way that he needs them to help and do the things that he needs to do? I think Kendall's a great hire, especially because he'll have that oversight of Sonny's offensive mind. But I can understand from a certain TCU fans' perspective of like, this feels a little dirty just because of how it was years and years ago. But, yeah, if they get him, great hire, and, see where the chips fall.
As I said, I reached out to Frogs today. They're the ones that had it, and I think they had it before TCU was ready for that to even be out there. And because I asked the question, do you think they floated the balloon to see if it would get popped? No, we had it earlier than they thought. And now it appears as if, just like on many other things, again, this is his 5th opportunity since Baylor with Kendall, but the blowback has been numerous and often and a lot. And the question is that what do the big money donors want? What about others involved? Bottom line is, if he's hired at TCU, fine, good for him. If he's not, that's fine too. They'll find somebody else, and maybe that would be Seth Luttrell, the former head coach at North Texas.
I do think it's weird considering he just re-upped with Arkansas.
Yeah.
He flirted with, or allegedly flirted with Mississippi State, re-signs with Arkansas or agrees to terms with Arkansas, and now like days later, here comes TCU calling. I get that Garrett Riley got plucked away, and so they had to do something. But I can see where Arkansas fans would be frustrated by kind of like the Harbaugh thing, a little bit of the song and dance each offseason of like, is he going to be back? Is he not? But well, that's also a coordinator. He's not locked in for life. It's not like he's the head coach and has to stick around. But I think on the surface, great hire, makes a lot of sense. He'd be good. It's not something personally that I'm like afraid of, if like from a Baylor standpoint, not even like the headline, but from like even a defensive standpoint. He runs a great offense, but I don't think it's like unstoppable. And that if TCU gets him, that like, oh my God, watch out. I don't feel that way, but I do think he'd be a really good hire, and obviously knows his stuff.
All right, one other note, and again, the thing about